Politicians been very busy over the last couple of weeks, including a couple of leadership debates. Joining us on the program now, political commentator Dr. Bryce Edwards. Bryce, it's been quite a couple of weeks, hasn't it?
Hi, Andrew. Yes. I'm not sure you've missed a lot.
I can catch up on the headlines.
I don't think things have shifted much in those 2 weeks. Certainly, the polls roll on pretty much where they were 2 weeks ago. National losing a little bit of its momentum. Labour still going downwards.
Chris Luxon doing better as preferred Prime Minister, though. He'll be happy with that.
Yeah, indeed. That's true. The Greens doing a bit better. New Zealand First, I think, is the main mover in those polls.
Yeah.
Seeming to be above that 5% quite credibly now. But yes, we've had those two leaders' debates. The first one on One News with Jessica Mackay chairing that about 10 days ago.
Yep.
And I found that a very bland, boring, lackluster affair. We didn't learn a lot. Both leaders were perfectly capable.
I heard a great comment on this one, actually. Somebody who watched the debate said that the winner on the night was vanilla. And they were both vanilla. I just wanted to say that if they were ice cream flavours, I think Chris Hipkins would be orange choc chip, surely. And maybe Christopher Luxon, goody gumdrops with tax cuts instead of lollies. But
yeah,
so
maybe
much for my ice cream analogy.
But even that makes it sound more exciting than they were.
But it actually was, okay.
But of course we had another leaders debate 2 nights ago on News Hub with Patrick Gower, and he's always a bit more colourful, shall we say. He provided a lot more energy for the debate, and Chris Hipkins in particular came into the debate with a lot more sort of aggression, shall we say. And I think he was fighting back, and we saw a much more animated Chris Hipkins. I think most people, most commentators thought he won the debate, whereas for the first one, Luxon was seen to be the winner. And again, I don't know if we learned a lot from the debate. I don't think it really shifted the dial on anyone's voting.
Still very much the underdog, but he came out barking this time, right?
He did a good job in taking it to Christopher Luxon. I'm not really sure he came out any more likable, though. He was more aggressive, but I don't know. The whole thing, like I said, was more colourful, more entertaining, but still a bit of bland vanilla there.
Exactly. Now, one of the actual substances that has been debated has been the financial aspect, and we've got the leaders, but it's also a battle between the finance minister and the finance spokesperson. The mood of the boardroom this morning. Any clear winners there? I mean, there's this tax hole with foreign buyers that doesn't seem to go away.
Yeah, I mean, we really are voting this year between Nicola Willis and Grant Robertson. I believe more than Luxon and Hipkins. There's going to be some big decisions that need to be made by the incoming government on the economy. They've put forward their financial plans, and both sides have some holes in them. I think that's pretty clear. And both sides are calling out the others, which is fair enough as well. I don't really detect that the public are particularly interested in those holes, or I think there's a public mood that isn't really into the financial details. They just want this or that. They either want the status quo or they want change, and they're probably willing to accept that both sides are massaging the figures in their own to their own benefit. But you're right in terms of that mood of the boardroom report that came out in the Herald today. That focuses more on the finance spokespeople, and I don't think anyone will be too surprised that the boardroom favours Nicola Willis, and they gave her a much higher rating as a credible finance spokesperson than they did for Robertson, and generally they were quite harsh on the Labour government's performance, but they didn't really give any huge vote of confidence in National either. So some of the ratings they were giving Luxon and National were kind of fairly mediocre.
I mean, mood of the boardroom generally isn't that optimistic. We've seen that with various quarterly reports. One of the areas, though, and I found this quite interesting because, yes, perhaps different flavours of Chris Vanilla, but one of the areas of clear difference that is emerging between the left and the right, as it were, is in the area of welfare policy. There is a clear distinction between, national, there's going to be restrictions on how long people can stay on welfare, and they're going to cut that back. ACT is going to be even stronger. I think Winston Peters has said that there's going to be a time limit on benefits. Whereas on the left, Labour, status quo, and certainly they've done a lot of work in that area. Greens would go deeper, and I think Te Pāti Māori's gone on the record to say that free food and electricity as a human right, although, yeah, that's enough to make that was possibly rhetoric rather than policy, but yet clear distinctions between one coalition, prospective coalition, and the other, perhaps.
Yeah, look, you're right. We're seeing a bit more clarity and distinction there, but even between those main players, Labour and National, the rhetoric might be bigger than the actual differences. Okay. Yes, National's come out with some sanctions they want for welfare beneficiaries. The current Labour government already has a number of sanctions on them, so I'm not sure it's as big a shift as people are making out. But yes, certainly ACT and Greens are miles apart on welfare obligations and benefits.
As you would expect them to be, yeah.
It's true. I mean, the other one that's probably we're seeing the most, at least heat and difference, is on race. I think that's the big issue that is illuminating things for people: co-governance, race relations, ethnicity, those sort of issues. I'm not sure we're debating them very well at the moment, but they certainly are bubbling up and bubbling over into these debates. So in the leaders' debate on News Hub 2 nights ago, that was really where there was a bit of spark. And Chris Hipkins is coming out defending co-governance much more strongly than he was, and really putting the heat on National. And we're seeing some other people coming out defending a more treaty-based approach. And so I think that is really what a lot of people are voting on in this election.
There's a lot more to a debate than just calling each other racist, though, or claiming that this is apartheid, and there's a lot of sloganeering in that space rather than nuanced discussion.
I totally agree, and I think it's one of the biggest disappointments about politics at the moment is we can't have that nuanced debate, and we without it all descending into that sort of thing, because these are actually quite important issues.
Something else which I wanted to get your take on, because with the battle of the economists, as it were, tax cuts and how to pay for them is one of these big things. And are we going to get enough foreign home buyers above the $2 million threshold in order to pay for this? Something which came out in the second debate, which both leaders agreed on, was looking at the possibility of tax-free status for charities, challenging this and perhaps removing the tax-free status on charities, including church groups, and saying, hey, maybe we don't need foreign buyers, we're just going to tax all the charities. Both leaders agreed that this was something worth looking into. That surprised me, honestly.
Yeah, I was surprised as well. And there's something a bit, to me at least, unsatisfactory about these leaders' debates where Patrick Gower, I mean, I love him. I think he does a good job, but he throws all these things on and he kind of lobbies the leaders to make these big calls. And I'm not really sure that's a good way to do tax policy in this country, that Patrick Gower is the person that brings it up and makes them have a split-second decision on which way to commit. So the one on charities, it's a long-running issue of the fact that the state in New Zealand gives tax exemption to groups that are doing good, or that are pursuing a kind of social cause,
or even making Weet-Bix, as it turns out.
Yeah, and so there's some controversial ones because some of these charities or religious groups actually are businesses too.
Yeah.
And so Sanitarium is the big one,
Mm-hmm.
owned by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and yes, making huge amounts of breakfast foods, etc., and and very profitable, but they don't have to pay taxes on that. So I think there is a bit of a room for debate about whether that is correct or not.
Of course, Destiny being the low-hanging fruit in this regard, everybody wants to take away Destiny's charitable status because of their views on a number of things. Ironically, they probably do more actual, genuine charitable work than a lot of the other churches in New Zealand. But again, something that both parties agree on. None of them like Bishop Brian.
Yeah, and it is always a bit alarming if we're making policies on just who we don't like.
Yeah.
And I mean, you and I might have our own views on Bishop Tamaki, but he's got a legitimate place in the system, and he should have the same sort of tax rules as anyone else in a similar situation. Yeah. So I think it's always a bit of a worry if the state clamps down on certain political opponents.
Yeah, and in some ways, it's the faith version of race baiting to be talking about some things. Let's get a reaction from atheists that think that churches should pay more tax so that they can pay less in some ways.
Yeah, I think it's a fair call.
Yeah. Okay, Bryce, hey, appreciate your comments as always. Looking forward to chatting with you next week. Have a great weekend. Thanks for your time.
Okay, you too. Thanks, Andrew.